Ryan Maddox never imagined buying a crumbling warehouse for his last $3,000 would put a gun to his daughter's head. But standing in the frozen Chicago night with armed men surrounding the rusted cars he'd spent 2 years restoring, watching his 9-year-old Emma pressed against a stranger's chest, he understood exactly how worthless his mechanic's hands were against men who killed for secrets buried in engine blocks. The Italian supercar behind him held evidence worth $20 million. The billionaire CEO, who once wanted him gone, now stood bleeding beside him, and Ryan had one chance to save everything that mattered. Before we begin, I invite you to follow this story to the very end. And when you do, hit that like button and comment with your city name so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the world. The wrench slipped from Ryan's frozen fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of Morrison's auto repair, the sound echoing through the empty bay like a gunshot. He stared at his hands, raw, cracked, bleeding around the knuckles from 12 straight hours wrestling with seized bolts and corroded brake lines. The skin around his wedding ring had gone white from the cold. "You still here, Maddox?" Ryan looked up to find Dale Morrison standing in the doorway of the shop office, backlit by the fluorescent lights, coat already on. His boss was a thick-necked man who'd owned this garage for 30 years and treated his mechanics like replaceable parts. "Just finishing the Camry transmission," Ryan said, straightening up. His lower back screamed in protest. "Should be done in 20. "Should have been done 3 hours ago." Dale pulled a toothpick from his shirt pocket and stuck it between his teeth. "I'm locking up in 10 whether you're finished or not." "Dale, come on!" "10 minutes, Maddox. I got a poker game." The office door slammed shut. Ryan pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. The Camry job paid $200. He needed every cent of it. The January rent was already 8 days late. Emma's school was asking about unpaid lunch fees, and the electricity bill had a bright red final notice stamp across the top. He grabbed the wrench and got back under the car. 15 minutes later, Dale killed the lights without warning. Ryan barely got the transmission pan bolted on before his boss physically walked him out the door and locked it behind them both. The toothpick never left Dale's mouth. "Tomorrow's Sunday," Dale said, jingling his keys. "You're off." "I could use the overtime. You could use a day off." "You look like hell." Dale climbed into his truck, then paused with the door half open. "You know, Maddox, you got a daughter to think about." "Working yourself into the ground ain't doing her any favors." The truck door slammed. Exhaust puffed white in the frozen air as Dale drove off, leaving Ryan standing in the empty parking lot with grease under his fingernails and $63 in his wallet. He walked 4 blocks to the bus stop through streets lined with dirty snow. Chicago in January was a special kind of misery. The wind came off Lake Michigan like razor blades, cutting through his work coat like it wasn't even there. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen, his elderly neighbor who watched Emma after school. Emma already ate. "No rush picking her up. Stay warm." Ryan typed back a thank you and slumped against the bus shelter. Around him, the city moved through its Saturday night rhythm. Couples headed to restaurants. Groups of friends laughing on their way to bars. Normal people with normal lives who didn't work double shifts just to stay 3 weeks behind on everything. The bus took 40 minutes. By the time Ryan climbed the stairs to Mrs. Chen's third-floor apartment, his legs felt like concrete. Emma opened the door before he could knock. "Dad!" She crashed into him and Ryan caught her, lifting her off the ground despite the exhaustion turning his bones to lead. She smelled like Mrs. Chen's jasmine tea and the strawberry shampoo they bought at the dollar store. Her dark hair, Sarah's hair, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Hey, monkey, you have a good day?" "Mrs. Chen taught me how to play mahjong. I won twice." "She let you win twice," Mrs. Chen called from the kitchen. The old woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Your daughter is a terrible bluffer, Ryan. Her face shows everything." Like her dad. Ryan set Emma down and met Mrs. Chen's eyes. "Thank you for watching her. I know it was supposed to be just until 6. Don't insult me." Mrs. Chen waved the towel at him. "Emma is always welcome. You know this." She sent them home with a container of leftover dumplings. Ryan tried to refuse, but Mrs. Chen literally pushed them out the door, and arguing with a 74-year-old Chinese woman was a losing battle Ryan had learned not to fight. Their apartment was 2 floors up in a building that should have been condemned 20 years ago. The radiator clanked and hissed but barely put out heat. Ryan cranked it anyway and helped Emma with her homework at their kitchen table, a folding card table with one leg shorter than the others, propped up with phone books. "How was work?" Emma asked, not looking up from her math worksheet. "Long, but tomorrow's Sunday. We can sleep in." "Can we go to the museum?" Ryan's chest tightened. The Museum of Science and Industry had free admission for Illinois residents on Thursdays, but Emma had been asking about the vintage car exhibit for 3 weeks, and the special display was only open on weekends. Weekend admission was $18 per person. "Maybe next month, monkey. Money's a little tight right now." Emma's pencil stopped moving. She was 9 years old, but she understood more than Ryan wanted her to. She'd understood when he explained her mother wasn't coming home from the hospital. She'd understood when they'd moved from the house in Oak Park to this cramped apartment in Pilsen. She understood that money's tight meant no. "That's okay," she said quietly. "I like playing mahjong with Mrs. Chen anyway." Ryan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, Em. It's not your fault, Dad." But it was. It absolutely was. After Emma went to bed, Ryan sat at the table with a beer he couldn't afford and a stack of bills he couldn't pay. The math didn't work no matter how many times he rearranged the numbers. Rent, utilities, food, Emma's school expenses. Dale paid him $14 an hour. Even with constant overtime, it wasn't enough. Sarah's life insurance had been enough to cover the medical bills and the funeral. Barely. After that, nothing. She'd been a freelance graphic designer, talented but always struggling to find steady clients. They'd been planning to get better insurance, planning to save money, planning to buy a house. Then she'd collapsed at Emma's 3rd birthday party, and 6 months later she was gone, and all their planning meant nothing. Ryan finished the beer and opened his laptop, a 6-year-old Dell that took 5 minutes to boot up. He scrolled through job listings, warehouse work, night security, delivery driver. Everything paid the same or less than Morrison's, and most required reliable transportation, which Ryan didn't have. He was about to close the laptop when an email notification popped up. Chicago Public Auction, abandoned property. Listings. Ryan had signed up for the mailing list months ago during a desperate 3 a.m. internet search for ways to make extra money. He'd fantasized about buying foreclosed houses, fixing them up, flipping them for profit. It was a stupid fantasy. He had no money, no time, and no business sense. But tonight, exhausted and hopeless, he clicked the email anyway. The list was mostly trash. Tax-delinquent residential properties in neighborhoods even worse than his. A burned-out convenience store. A former restaurant with water damage. Then, at the bottom, warehouse. 2,847 South Riverside Drive. 12,000 square feet. Industrial zoning. Minimum bid, $2,500. Sold as is. Inspection by appointment only. Ryan stared at the listing. $2,500. He had $63 in his wallet and maybe $400 in checking. But the auction was in 2 weeks. If he worked every possible hour, picked up side jobs, sold some of their furniture, he clicked on the attached photos. The warehouse was a disaster. Rusted corrugated metal siding, broken windows, a roof that looked ready to collapse. The interior shots showed nothing but shadows and debris. According to the description, the property had been seized from the previous owner for unpaid taxes. No utilities, no heat, probably full of rats. Ryan closed the laptop. It was insane. Even if he somehow scraped together the minimum bid, what would he do with a condemned warehouse? He was a mechanic, not a real estate developer. He barely had time to sleep, much less renovate a building, but the idea wouldn't leave him alone. He reopened the laptop and looked at the photos again. The location was interesting. Right on the river, in a part of town that had been industrial wasteland for decades but was slowly gentrifying. The building was huge. If someone fixed it up, converted it to lofts or commercial space, it could be worth... Ryan laughed at himself. He sounded like every delusional house-flipping show on cable TV. This was exactly how people went bankrupt. He closed the laptop again and went to bed. But Sunday morning, he woke up thinking about the warehouse. While Emma watched cartoons, he researched the property. The building had been constructed in 1952, originally used for manufacturing automotive parts. It had changed hands 6 times over the decades before the last owner, some LLC Ryan had never heard of, had let it fall into tax delinquency. The city wanted it gone. That's why the minimum bid was so low. Monday morning, Ryan asked Dale for every overtime hour available. Dale gave him a strange look, but agreed. Tuesday, Ryan responded to 3 Craigslist ads for under-the-table mechanic work. Wednesday, he fixed a transmission in someone's driveway for $200 cash and didn't get home until midnight. Emma asked why he was never home. "Just trying to get ahead, monkey," he told her. She looked at him with Sarah's eyes, deep brown, too perceptive, and nodded like she believed him. Thursday, Ryan visited the warehouse. He took the bus to a neighborhood he'd never been to, got off at a stop surrounded by chain-link fences and closed-down factories, and walked 6 blocks to the river. The warehouse sat on a forgotten stretch of Riverside Drive, separated from the water by 50 feet of cracked pavement and dead weeds. Up close, it was worse than the photos. The metal siding was more rust than steel. The loading dock had partially collapsed. One wall had a hole the size of a garage door where something had smashed through and never been repaired. Ryan pulled on the padlocked front entrance and felt the entire doorframe shift in the wall. He walked the perimeter. Broken glass everywhere. Graffiti tags covering every accessible surface. The smell of decay and standing water. Behind the building, the Chicago River moved past in sullen silence, its surface the color of pewter. This was monumentally stupid. Ryan was turning to leave when he noticed a gap in the metal siding near the collapsed loading dock. He glanced around. The street was empty, and squeezed through. The interior was cavern dark. Ryan pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The space was enormous. Concrete floors, steel support beams rising into shadows. Rusted machinery he couldn't identify, piles of debris. The ceiling had holes where you could see straight through to the sky. Pigeons scattered at the sound of his footsteps. Ryan swept the light across the far wall and froze. Cars. At least a dozen of them, covered in tarps and dust, lined up along the back of the warehouse like forgotten soldiers. Ryan walked closer, his heart suddenly pounding. He grabbed the corner of the nearest tarp and pulled. Dust exploded into the air. Ryan coughed, waved it away, and stared. A 1967 Chevrolet Impala, primer gray, covered in grime, sitting on flat tires. But underneath the dirt, the body looked solid, no visible rust through. The chrome trim was still there. Ryan moved to the next car. 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 302. Same condition, filthy, neglected, but potentially restorable. The next one made his breath catch. A 1972 Chevelle SS. The tarp had rotted through in places and water damage had gotten to the driver's side, but the engine bay looked intact. He went down the line. A Plymouth Roadrunner. A Dodge Charger. 2 more Mustangs. A Pontiac GTO. Every single one was a classic muscle car from the late 60s and early 70s. Someone had collected these vehicles and just left them here to rot. Ryan's hands were shaking. These cars, if they could be restored, were worth serious money. Even in their current condition, they had value. The parts alone. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. His mind was racing. If he bought this warehouse, the cars came with it. He could restore them, sell them, use the profit to fix up the building. This wasn't just a condemned property. This was an opportunity, or it was a trap. A money pit that would swallow whatever savings he managed to scrape together and leave him worse off than before. Ryan stood in the darkness, surrounded by forgotten machines, and tried to think clearly. He had 9 days until the auction. Even if he got the warehouse, he'd have no money left for materials, tools, or repairs. He'd be working on these cars in a building with no heat, no electricity, probably no running water. It would take years. And he still had a daughter to feed and rent to pay. This was insane. Ryan took one last look at the cars and left. But over the next week, while he worked double shifts at Morrison's and picked up side jobs every night, he couldn't stop thinking about that warehouse, about the Impala and the Mustang and the Chevelle, about the possibility, however remote, that he could build something from nothing. By Sunday, he'd saved $1,800. He borrowed $500 from Mrs. Chen with a promise to pay her back within 3 months. That gave him $2,300, still $200 short of the minimum bid. Monday morning, Ryan brought his wedding ring to a pawn shop on Western Avenue. The kid behind the counter was maybe 20, covered in tattoos, bored. He examined the ring with a jeweler's loop and offered Ryan $150. "It's 14-karat gold," Ryan said. "It's worth more than that." "Maybe to you." The kid slid the ring back across the counter. "$150 is my offer." Ryan stared at the ring. Sarah had put it on his finger 11 years ago in a courthouse ceremony with 8 people in attendance. They'd been planning a bigger wedding later, a real celebration, but Emma had come along and money was always tight, and they'd never gotten around to it. "200, Ryan said. $175. "Deal." Ryan walked out with cash in his pocket and nothing on his left hand except a pale band of skin that had never seen sunlight. The auction was held Tuesday afternoon in a municipal building downtown. Ryan took a half day off work, Dale wasn't happy about it, and sat in a room with about 30 other people, most of them developers or investors in suits, tapping on phones. The auctioneer was a tired-looking woman who ran through properties with mechanical efficiency. The first few went for 10, 20 times the minimum bid. Ryan felt sick. If the warehouse generated that kind of interest, he didn't have a chance. But when 2847 South Riverside Drive came up, only 2 people bid. Ryan and a woman in the back row. They went back and forth. 2600, 27, 28. The woman bid 3,000 and glanced at Ryan with visible impatience. 3,000 going once, the auctioneer said. Ryan's heart was slamming against his ribs. He had $23.75. If he bid again and won, he wouldn't have enough to pay. 3,000 going twice. Ryan stood up. "I'm out." The woman in the back smiled. "Sold for $3,000 to bidder 41. Ryan sat back down, his hands shaking. It was over. He'd lost. And maybe that was better. Maybe that was the universe saving him from his own stupidity. But as he stood to leave, the auctioneer called the next property, and Ryan heard the woman in the back row answer her phone. "Are you serious?" The woman's voice cut across the room. "When?" "Jesus Christ, fine, I'll deal with it." She hung up and immediately approached the auctioneer. Ryan couldn't hear the conversation, but the woman looked angry. The auctioneer shook her head firmly. The woman argued. The auctioneer pointed to a sign on the wall that Ryan assumed said something about no refunds. 5 minutes later, the woman stormed out. The auctioneer sighed and picked up her microphone. "Due to an immediate withdrawal, property reference 2847 South Riverside Drive is being reoffered. Bidding will restart at the minimum, $2,500. Ryan's brain stopped working. "Do I have 2,500? Ryan raised his hand. 2,500 to bidder 17. Do I have 26? Silence. No one else in the room wanted a condemned warehouse in a neighborhood with nothing around it. "Sold to bidder 17 for $2,500. Ryan walked out of the municipal building in a daze. He'd just bought a warehouse, with money he didn't have, for a reason he couldn't explain. The paperwork wouldn't be finalized for 2 weeks, but it was his. He called Emma from the bus. "Hey, monkey, how was school?" "Fine. Mrs. Chen made dumplings again." "Listen, I need to tell you something. I bought a building." "Like a house?" "Like a warehouse. It's kind of a mess, but I'm going to fix it up. It might take a while." Silence on the other end. Then, "Is that why you've been working so much?" "Yeah." "Are we going to move there?" "No, monkey. We're staying in the apartment. This is for, I don't know yet, but it's going to be good. I promise." More silence. Ryan imagined Emma sitting at Mrs. Chen's table, holding the phone, trying to understand why her father had done something that probably sounded completely crazy. "Okay, Dad," she finally said. "I believe you." Ryan closed his eyes. "Thanks, Em. I'll pick you up in an hour." He rode the bus home and told Mrs. Chen what he'd done. She listened without interruption, then made him tea and told him he was either very brave or very stupid, and only time would tell which. "Probably stupid," Ryan admitted. "Probably," Mrs. Chen agreed. "But you're trying. That counts for something." That night, after Emma went to bed, Ryan sat at the folding table and made a list of everything he needed to do. Secure the building, get utilities turned on, start cleaning out the debris, assess the cars, figure out which ones were salvageable, source parts, tools, time, money. The list got longer and longer until it was 3 pages of impossibilities. Ryan crumpled the papers and threw them across the room. What had he done? He'd spent his last dollar on a building that was falling apart. He had no plan, no resources, no help. He was going to lose everything. Emma would end up in foster care when he couldn't pay rent. This wasn't bravery. This was self-destruction. He put his head in his hands and sat there in the dark, listening to the radiator clank and the neighbors yell through the thin walls. Then he thought about the 1967 Impala sitting under that tarp, about the Mustang and the Chevelle, about the way Emma had said, "I believe you," even though she had no reason to. Ryan picked up the crumpled papers, smoothed them out, and started writing. The next morning, he asked Dale for a week off without pay. Dale said no. Ryan quit on the spot, walked out of Morrison's Auto Repair, and didn't look back. Mrs. Chen nearly had a heart attack when he told her, "You quit your job? Ryan, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I can't keep working for Dale and fix up the warehouse at the same time. I've got maybe 3 months of savings if I'm careful. That's enough to get started." "And if you fail?" "Then I fail." Ryan met her eyes. "But I'm tired of barely surviving. I want to build something. For Emma. For me. I have to try." Mrs. Chen shook her head. "You're an idiot." "I know. Your daughter needs stability, not a father chasing fantasies." "I know that too." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll watch Emma whenever you need. No charge." "Mrs. Chen, don't argue with me. Someone needs to keep that child fed while you destroy your life." But she was almost smiling. Ryan threw himself into the warehouse. He spent the first 3 days just clearing debris, broken glass, rotted wood, rusted metal, piles of unidentifiable trash. He rented a dumpster he couldn't afford and filled it twice. He patched the worst holes in the roof with salvaged corrugated metal and sealed the broken windows with plywood. The cars remained under their tarps. Ryan didn't have time to deal with them yet. He worked 16-hour days. His hands bled, his back seized up. He fell asleep every night on a cot in the corner of the warehouse because he was too exhausted to go home. Emma visited on weekends. She brought sandwiches and helped sweep the floors. She asked about the cars, and Ryan told her about each one, the year, the model, what made it special. "Can we fix them, Dad?" "We're going to try, Monkey." "Will it take a long time?" "Probably." She nodded seriously. "That's okay. Good things take time. That's what Mom used to say." Ryan had to turn away so she wouldn't see his face. 2 weeks in, the electricity got turned on. Ryan ran temporary lights and space heaters. The warehouse was still freezing, but at least he could see what he was doing. 3 weeks in, his savings were half gone. Ryan started taking odd jobs again, anything he could find. He fixed cars in people's driveways at night. He did oil changes in grocery store parking lots. Every dollar went into the warehouse. 4 weeks in, he finally removed all the tarps. 12 classic cars, lined up in various states of decay. Ryan walked the line with a notebook, assessing each one. Some were beyond saving. Rust had eaten through the floor pans, the frames were bent, the engines were frozen solid. But others had potential. He started with the 1967 Impala. It took Ryan 3 days just to get the engine bay cleaned out. Mice had built nests in the air cleaner. The carburetor was seized, the wiring harness was rotted through, but the engine block itself was salvageable. The transmission was intact. The body, under all the grime, was straight. Ryan ordered parts with money he didn't have on a credit card that was already maxed out. He worked on the Impala every spare moment, teaching himself as he went. YouTube videos became his textbook. Online forums became his mentors. 6 weeks in, the Impala turned over for the first time. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a miracle. Ryan stood there with grease up to his elbows, staring at the running engine, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Emma was there when it happened. She clapped her hands and cheered like Ryan had just won the lottery. "It works, Dad! You fixed it! Just the engine, Monkey. There's still a lot to do." but for the first time, it felt possible. The next week, reality hit. Ryan's landlord knocked on the apartment door with an eviction notice, 2 months behind on rent. He had 14 days to pay or get out. Ryan stood in his kitchen, their kitchen, and did the math. Even if he sold everything he owned, worked every job he could find, he'd still be short. The warehouse had eaten everything. He called Mrs. Chen. "Can Emma stay with you for a while?" "How long is a while?" "I don't know. I'm being evicted. I need to figure things out." A long pause. "Ryan, you can't live in that warehouse. It's not safe." "I don't have a choice." "You have a daughter?" "I know." Ryan's voice came out sharper than he intended. He took a breath. "I know. That's why I'm asking. Emma needs stability. She needs to stay in school, keep her routine. I can't give her that right now, but you can." Another pause, then, "Bring her over tonight. We'll make it work." Ryan explained it to Emma as gently as he could. They were going to stay with Mrs. Chen for a little while, just until things settled down. It wasn't permanent. It wasn't like before. Emma packed her things without crying, which somehow made it worse. Ryan moved into the warehouse with a sleeping bag, a space heater, and a sense that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He worked on the Impala like a man possessed. 16, 18, 20 hours a day. He stopped answering his phone. He barely ate. The car became everything. The only thing standing between him and complete failure. 2 months after buying the warehouse, Ryan drove the restored 1967 Impala out onto Riverside Drive for the first time. The engine purred. The transmission shifted smooth. The body gleamed under a fresh coat of primer. It wasn't perfect. Ryan had cut corners, used salvaged parts, left some cosmetic issues for later. But it ran. It was real. He posted photos on classic car forums. Within a week, he had 3 offers. The highest was $18,000. Ryan sold the Impala for $17,500 to a collector in Wisconsin who drove down with a trailer and cash. They shook hands in front of the warehouse, and the man told Ryan he did good work. "You got more cars in there?" the collector asked. 11 more. "Fix them up like this one, and I'll buy every one you've got." Ryan paid his back rent. He bought groceries. He took Emma to the Museum of Science and Industry and watched her face light up at the vintage car exhibit. That night, she asked when she could come home. "Soon, monkey, I promise." He meant it. For the first time in months, it felt true. The second car took half the time. Ryan started on the 1970 Mustang Boss 302 the day after the Impala sold, working with a confidence he hadn't possessed before. He knew what he was doing now. The rhythm of disassembly, cleaning, repair, reassembly had become muscle memory. His hands moved faster. His eyes caught problems before they became catastrophic. The warehouse felt less like a prison and more like a workshop, but confidence made him careless. He was under the Mustang on a Tuesday afternoon draining the old oil when he heard footsteps echoing across the concrete floor. Ryan rolled out from under the car to find a woman standing in the doorway. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ryan's entire wardrobe, her dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was maybe 30, pale skin, sharp features, and an expression that suggested she'd never smiled in her life. Behind her stood 2 men in cheaper suits carrying clipboards. "This property is private," Ryan said, standing up and wiping his hands on a rag. "You're trespassing." The woman didn't flinch. "My name is Vanessa Sterling. I represent Sterling Development Group. We're conducting a site survey of properties in this district." "Well, you can survey somewhere else. I own this building." "I'm aware." Vanessa glanced around the warehouse with the kind of look people give to car accidents. "I'm also aware that you purchased it at auction for $2,500. That was a mistake." "Excuse me?" "This property was supposed to be acquired by my company. There was a clerical error that prevented our bid from being processed. We're prepared to offer you $10,000 to resolve the situation." Ryan stared at her. "You want to buy my warehouse for $10,000? That's 4 times what you paid. It's a generous offer considering the building's condition." "It's not for sale." Vanessa's expression didn't change. "Mr. Maddox, be reasonable. You're a mechanic living in a condemned building with no heat, no proper plumbing, and a roof that won't survive another heavy snow. We're offering you a significant profit for minimal investment." "How do you know I'm a mechanic?" I know everything about you. You quit your job at Morrison's Auto Repair 6 weeks ago. You're behind on child support payments. Your daughter is currently living with a neighbor because you were evicted from your apartment. You have $17,000 in credit card debt and no viable income source. She paused. You're drowning, Mr. Maddox. I'm throwing you a rope. Ryan felt heat climbing up his neck. Get out. 20,000. I said get out. Think about your daughter. Don't you dare talk about my daughter. Ryan took a step forward. The two men with Vanessa tensed, but she held up one hand and they stopped. She studied Ryan for a long moment. You're making a poor financial decision. It's my decision to make. Indeed. Vanessa turned to leave, then paused. Out of curiosity, what exactly are you planning to do with this property? Ryan gestured at the Mustang. Restore cars, build a business, something that's mine. Admirable. The word sounded like an insult. Unfortunately, in 18 months, this entire district will be demolished to make room for a luxury casino resort. Sterling Development owns every property on this block except yours. You're an obstacle, Mr. Maddox, and obstacles get removed. She left before Ryan could respond. He stood there in the empty warehouse, hands shaking, and realized he'd just made an enemy he couldn't afford. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in his sleeping bag, listening to the river and replaying the conversation in his head. Vanessa Sterling had investigated him. She knew about Emma, about the eviction, about his debt. She'd offered him money like she was doing him a favor, but Ryan had heard the threat underneath. 18 months until demolition. He pulled out his phone and searched for Sterling Development Group. The results were immediate and extensive. Vanessa Sterling, CEO. 30 years old. Harvard MBA. Daughter of real estate mogul Richard Sterling, who died 3 years ago and left her his entire empire. Under her leadership, Sterling Development had demolished half of Chicago's South Side and replaced it with high-rise condos and commercial developments. She was a bulldozer in a suit, and Ryan had just told her no. The next morning, he called Emma. Hey, monkey, how's school? Fine. We're learning about fractions. Her voice sounded small through the phone. When can I come see the warehouse again? This weekend. I promise. You said that last weekend. Ryan closed his eyes. She was right. He'd been working so hard on the Mustang that he'd barely seen his daughter in 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Em. Things have been crazy, but this weekend for sure, okay? Okay. A pause. Dad, are you eating? Yes. Mrs. Chen says you look skinny. Mrs. Chen worries too much. She says that's her job since Mom's not here to do it. Ryan's throat tightened. I'll see you this weekend, monkey. I love you. Love you too. He worked on the Mustang with renewed urgency. If Vanessa Sterling wanted this property, that meant it was valuable, which meant Ryan needed to prove it was worth more as a restoration shop than as a pile of rubble. The Mustang fought him every step of the way. The engine had a cracked cylinder head that required machining work Ryan couldn't do himself. The transmission needed a complete rebuild. The electrical system was a nightmare of crossed wires and corroded connections. Parts that should have fit didn't. Gaskets leaked. Bolts snapped. Ryan worked 18-hour days and still felt like he was falling behind. Then the break-ins started. The first time, Ryan thought he'd imagined it. He arrived at the warehouse one morning to find the side door ajar. The same gap in the siding he'd used to enter the building on his first visit. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed. The tools were where he'd left them. The Mustang was untouched. But Ryan's gut said someone had been there. He bought a padlock and chain securing the door from the inside. 3 nights later, he woke to the sound of metal scraping against concrete. Ryan grabbed the tire iron he kept next to his sleeping bag and moved quietly across the warehouse floor. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows. Near the back wall, where the remaining cars sat under their tarps, a figure was hunched over the 1972 Chevelle. Hey! The figure bolted. Ryan chased him through the warehouse, but the guy was faster and knew exactly where the exits were. By the time Ryan reached the side door, the intruder had disappeared into the night. Ryan went back to the Chevelle. The tarp had been pulled aside. The driver's door was open. Someone had been searching the interior, pulling out the rotted seats, checking under the dashboard. looking for something. Ryan checked every car. 3 others showed signs of disturbance: doors ajar, hoods popped, trunk lids pried open. Nothing seemed missing, but the message was clear. Someone wanted something in these cars. The next morning, Ryan bought security cameras from a pawn shop and mounted them around the warehouse. They were cheap and half broken, but they might deter whoever was breaking in. It didn't work. 2 nights later, the cameras caught 3 men entering through a window Ryan had thought too high to reach. They went straight for the cars, methodical and efficient, searching each vehicle like professionals. When they didn't find what they wanted, they left. Ryan reviewed the footage a dozen times. The men wore dark clothes and ski masks. No identifying features. No vehicle visible. They knew what they were doing. He called the police. The officer who showed up was maybe 25, looked bored, and took a statement with obvious skepticism. So nothing was stolen? No, but, and you didn't see the suspects clearly? They were wearing masks. Mr. Maddox, I'll file the report, but without theft or clear evidence of who's responsible, there's not much we can do. I'd suggest better locks. The officer left. Ryan stood in the warehouse surrounded by cars that someone desperately wanted to search, and realized he was on his own. He started sleeping with the tire iron next to his head. The Mustang was finally coming together. Ryan had sourced a replacement cylinder head from a salvage yard in Indiana, rebuilt the transmission himself using parts ordered from 3 different suppliers, and rewired the entire electrical system from scratch. The body still needed work: rust repair, paint, chrome restoration, but the mechanical guts were solid. He was installing the carburetor when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Maddox, this is Jennifer Park from Chicago Tribune. I'm doing a story on urban renewal in the Riverside District and heard you recently purchased property there. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? Ryan's instincts screamed trap. How did you get my number? Public records. The property sale is a matter of public record. I'm just trying to understand the neighborhood transformation from a resident's perspective. I'm not a resident. I run a business here. Even better, what kind of business? Ryan hesitated. Something about this felt wrong. Car restoration. Look, I'm really busy. Just one more question. Is it true Vanessa Sterling offered to purchase your property and you refused? There it was. Who told you that? I can't reveal my sources, but I'm interested in your side of the story. Sterling Development has been aggressive about acquiring properties in this district. Some would say predatory. Your refusal to sell is notable. Ryan thought about it. A newspaper story painting Vanessa Sterling as a predatory developer might actually help his case. Public pressure could slow down her casino project, buy him time. Or it could make everything worse. No comment, Ryan said, and hung up. The call bothered him all day. Someone had leaked his conversation with Vanessa to the press. Either Vanessa herself, trying to paint Ryan as unreasonable, or one of her employees. Either way, it meant she was making moves. That weekend, Emma finally visited the warehouse. Mrs. Chen drove her over Saturday morning, and Ryan gave them the tour. The Impala was gone, but the Mustang was nearly finished. Emma walked around it with wide eyes, touching the fresh primer, peeking under the hood. It's so cool, Dad. You think so? It looks like a race car. It kind of is. This engine makes almost 400 horsepower. Emma had no idea what that meant, but she smiled anyway. Mrs. Chen examined the warehouse with open skepticism. You're living here, she said. It wasn't a question. Temporarily. There's no bathroom. There's a bathroom. It just doesn't have running water yet. Mrs. Chen muttered something in Mandarin that Ryan didn't understand but assumed was unflattering. She pulled him aside while Emma explored. Ryan, this is not sustainable. The child needs her father, not on weekends, every day. I know. Then fix it. Sell a car. Rent an apartment. Stop living like a homeless person. I sold a car. The money went to back rent and debt. Then sell another one. The Mustang's not done yet. And after that, I need to build inventory. If I can get 3 or 4 cars restored, I can sell them all at once for real money. Enough to rent a place and bring Emma home. But that takes time. Mrs. Chen looked at him with something between pity and frustration. Time your daughter doesn't have. She's 9 years old, Ryan. She needs stability, not promises. I'm doing the best I can. I know you are. That's what worries me. They didn't stay long. Emma hugged Ryan goodbye and made him promise to call every night. Mrs. Chen drove away, and Ryan stood in the empty warehouse feeling like he'd failed some test he didn't know he was taking. He got back to work on the Mustang. Monday morning, Ryan woke to the sound of heavy machinery. He stumbled outside to find a demolition crew setting up across the street. 2 excavators, a bulldozer, workers in hard hats. They were tearing down the old soap factory that had been abandoned since the 80s. A man in a sterling development jacket was directing traffic. Ryan walked over. "What's going on?" The man consulted a clipboard. "Demolition and site prep. We're clearing the whole block. This building's not part of that. Not yet." The man smiled. "But give it time." Ryan went back inside and called a lawyer. The consultation was free, and the lawyer's assessment was bleak. If Sterling Development owns the surrounding properties and has municipal approval for their casino project, they can make your life very difficult. Eminent domain, zoning changes, infrastructure modifications that make your property inaccessible. They have options. What are my options? Prove the property has historical or cultural value. Get community support. Make yourself enough of a nuisance that buying you out is easier than fighting you. The lawyer paused. Or sell and take the money. I'm not selling. Then prepare for a long fight, Mr. Maddox, and fights cost money. Ryan hung up and stared at the Mustang. He needed to finish this car, sell it, and move on to the next one. Speed was his only advantage. If he could build a profitable business fast enough, he might have leverage. The Mustang sold 3 weeks later for $22,000 to a collector in Michigan. Ryan used the money to pay off his highest interest credit cards, buy a month's worth of groceries, and rent a studio apartment 2 blocks from Mrs. Chen's building. It was tiny, barely furnished, and the heat barely worked, but it had a bathroom and a kitchen and a door that locked. Emma moved back in that weekend. She unpacked her things into the closet-sized bedroom, hung her drawings on the walls, and helped Ryan assemble a used bed frame he'd bought off Craigslist. That night, they ate spaghetti at a card table that wobbled, and Emma talked about school and her friends and how Mrs. Chen had taught her to make dumplings. Ryan listened and felt something in his chest unclench for the first time in months. "This place is nice, Dad." "It's small." "That's okay. We're small too." She grinned at him, and Ryan saw Sarah in the curve of her smile. "I missed you, monkey." "I missed you too." Things got better after that. Ryan established a routine. He'd wake up early, get Emma ready for school, drop her at Mrs. Chen's, then work at the warehouse until evening. Dinner with Emma, help with homework, bedtime, then back to the warehouse until midnight. It was exhausting, but it was stable. He started on the third car, a 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner. The engine was seized, the interior was destroyed, and rust had eaten through the quarter panels, but the frame was straight and the VIN tag showed it was a numbers-matching car. If Ryan could bring it back to life, it would be worth $40,000 or more. The break-ins continued. Someone was searching the cars at least once a week now. Ryan had reinforced the locks, installed better cameras, even slept at the warehouse some nights. But the intruders were persistent. They never took anything. They just searched. Ryan started searching too. He went through each car methodically, pulling out seats, checking door panels, examining wheel wells. He found mouse nests, ancient fast food wrappers, a Playboy magazine from 1973, and exactly nothing that seemed worth breaking into a warehouse repeatedly. Then he found the envelope. It was wedged behind the back seat of the 1970 Dodge Charger, wrapped in plastic and duct taped to the underside of the seat frame. Ryan almost missed it during his inspection. When he finally pulled it free, the plastic cracked from age. Inside was a stack of papers. Ryan spread them across his workbench under the harsh LED light. Financial documents. Bank statements from 1987. Transfer records showing large sums of money moving between accounts. Names Ryan didn't recognize. And stamped across several pages. Evidence: federal investigation. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note on yellowed paper. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. These cars are worth more than money. Don't trust anyone, especially not the ones who say they're trying to help. MC." Ryan read the note 3 times. The financial documents referenced something called the Riverside Development Fund, a real estate investment scheme that had apparently collapsed in the late 80s. According to the bank statements, millions of dollars had vanished. The transfer records showed money flowing to shell companies and offshore accounts, and several transfers were signed by someone named Richard Sterling. Ryan's blood went cold. Richard Sterling, Vanessa's father, the real estate mogul who'd built Sterling Development into an empire. Ryan grabbed his laptop and started searching. The Riverside Development Fund collapse had been a major scandal in 1988. Investors lost everything. Federal investigators suspected fraud, but never brought charges. The fund's founder, Marcus Chen, had disappeared shortly after the collapse. His body was found 3 months later in the Chicago River. Official cause of death? Suicide. But Marcus Chen's family had always maintained he was murdered. Ryan looked at the cars lined up in the warehouse. Marcus Chen had owned this building. Marcus Chen had collected these cars. And Marcus Chen had hidden evidence of financial crimes inside one of them before he died. Evidence that implicated Richard Sterling. The break-ins suddenly made sense. Someone knew the evidence was here. Someone was desperate to find it before Ryan did. And Ryan had just become the biggest liability in Chicago. He called Vanessa Sterling's office the next morning. The receptionist put him on hold for 10 minutes before Vanessa picked up. "Mr. Maddox, changed your mind about selling? I found something in one of the cars. I think we need to talk." A pause. "What did you find?" "Not over the phone. Meet me at the warehouse tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone." "Mr. Maddox, if this is some kind of... It's about your father." Silence. Then, "I'll be there." Ryan spent the rest of the day preparing. He made copies of the documents, hid the originals, set up his cameras to record. If Vanessa was behind the break-ins, he wanted evidence. If she wasn't, he needed to know who was. 8 o'clock came. Vanessa arrived in a black Mercedes, alone as promised. She wore jeans and a leather jacket instead of her usual suit, and Ryan realized it was the first time he'd seen her look remotely human. "You have 5 minutes," she said, stepping into the warehouse. Ryan handed her the copies. She read them in silence, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at Ryan with something that might have been respect. "Where did you find these?" "Hidden in one of the cars. I'm guessing you knew they were here." "I suspected. My father had a lot of secrets. Most of them died with him." She handed the papers back. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because someone's been breaking into my warehouse looking for them, and I want to know if it's you." Vanessa laughed, short and bitter. "If I wanted those documents, Mr. Maddox, you'd already be in the river and I'd own this building. No. Whoever's searching your property isn't working for me." "Then who?" "Anyone who was involved in the Riverside Development Fund and doesn't want their name attached to fraud charges. My father kept records on everyone he did business with. Insurance, he called it. If those documents surface, a lot of powerful people lose everything." Ryan felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. "So what do I do?" Vanessa studied him for a long moment. "You give them to me. I'll make sure they disappear. In exchange, I'll triple my offer for this property, $75,000. You walk away, rebuild your life, and forget any of this happened." It was the smart play. Take the money, protect Emma, let someone else deal with decades-old crimes. But Ryan looked around the warehouse, at the cars he'd restored, at the business he was building from nothing, at proof he could create something meaningful with his own hands. "No," he said. Vanessa didn't look surprised. "Then you're a fool." "Probably, but I'm keeping the warehouse and the evidence. If your father was involved in fraud, that's not my problem. I'm not covering for him." "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "Then explain it to me." Vanessa walked to the window and stared out at the river. "My father built his empire on other people's money. The Riverside Development Fund was just one of many schemes. When it collapsed, he made sure the blame fell on Marcus Chen. Chen knew it. That's why he collected evidence, and that's why he's dead. You think your father killed him?" "I think my father made a phone call, and Marcus Chen ended up in the river." She turned back to Ryan. "The people my father did business with are still out there, still powerful, still dangerous. If they know you have evidence against them, you're not just risking your warehouse. You're risking your life and your daughter's." The words hit like a fist. Ryan thought about Emma sleeping in their tiny apartment, trusting him to keep her safe. What if I go to the police? With 30-year-old documents from a closed investigation? They'll thank you for your civic duty and file it away. Nothing will happen. Except everyone involved will know you're the one who brought it forward. Ryan ran his hands through his hair. So my options are sell to you or paint a target on my back. Those are your options, yes. They stood in silence, the warehouse settling around them with creaks and groans. Finally, Ryan spoke. There's a third option. Which is? We work together. You help me figure out who's breaking in. I keep the evidence safe. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets bought off. We just exist. You do your casino project around my property. I keep restoring cars. Everyone moves on. Vanessa stared at him like he'd suggested they fly to the moon. You're serious. I'm serious. You really think it's that simple? I think it's worth trying. Vanessa laughed again, but this time it sounded almost genuine. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Mr. Maddox. I haven't decided which. Most people say stupid. Most people are probably right. She walked toward the door, then paused. I'll think about your proposal. In the meantime, watch your back and get better locks. She left. Ryan stood alone in the warehouse, holding evidence of crimes he didn't commit, and wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. That night, someone tried to burn the warehouse down. Ryan smelled the smoke before he saw the flames. He'd been asleep in the apartment for maybe 3 hours when his phone started buzzing with motion alerts from the warehouse cameras. Half awake, he pulled up the app and watched a figure moving along the side of the building, pouring something from a container. Then the figure struck a match. Ryan was out the door in his boxers and a t-shirt, didn't even grab shoes, just ran. Mrs. Chen's apartment was dark as he sprinted past. The streets were empty at 2 a.m, the pavement like ice under his bare feet. He called 911 while running, gasping out the address between breaths. By the time he reached the warehouse, flames were climbing the north wall. The fire was eating through the old wood framing around the windows, black smoke pouring into the night sky. Ryan grabbed the extinguisher he kept by the front door and attacked the flames, but it was like fighting a forest fire with a garden hose. The chemical spray slowed it down but didn't stop it. He ran inside for the second extinguisher, pulled the tarps off the nearest cars, and started dragging them toward the loading dock. The Plymouth Roadrunner, the Charger, 2 Mustangs he hadn't touched yet. His lungs were burning from the smoke. His hands were blistered from the hot metal. He got 4 cars out before the fire department arrived and physically pulled him away from the building. 3 fire trucks. Hoses spraying water that turned to steam against the flames. Firefighters in full gear telling Ryan to stay back while they did their job. He stood on the street in bare feet and watched his life burn. It took them an hour to get it under control. The north wall was mostly gone. The roof had collapsed in 2 places. Water damage had destroyed everything the fire hadn't touched. Ryan walked through the wreckage as the sun came up, stepping over charred debris and pools of oily water. The Chevelle was totaled, the body warped from heat. 3 other cars were damaged beyond repair. His tools were either melted or ruined by water. The cot where he'd slept, the workbench where he'd spread out Marcus Chen's documents, the space heaters and temporary lights, all of it was destroyed. 8 cars left. 4 of them damaged. Ryan had insurance on the building, but not the contents. He'd been meaning to get better coverage, but never had the money. A fire investigator walked the perimeter, taking photos and making notes. Ryan followed him. Can you tell what started it? The investigator pointed to the scorch pattern on the outside wall. Accelerant. Gasoline or lighter fluid poured along the base. This was arson. I know, I've got it on camera. The investigator's eyebrows went up. You have footage of someone setting the fire? Yeah, I called 911 before I got here. I need to see that footage. Ryan pulled up his phone, but the video files from that night were corrupted. The camera must have been damaged in the fire before it could upload to the cloud. All he had were the motion alerts, not the actual recordings. The investigator wrote something down. Without the footage, all we can prove is that the fire was deliberately set. Not who set it. You have any enemies, Mr. Maddox? Ryan laughed, bitter and exhausted. Take your pick. The police came by later that morning. Same board officer who'd taken the break-in report. He looked slightly less bored when he saw the damage. You're having a rough month. That's one way to put it. Ryan was sitting on the loading dock, his feet wrapped in bandages from the paramedics. The soles had been cut up worse than he'd realized. The investigator says you claim to have video evidence. The camera was destroyed. Convenient. Ryan looked at him. You think I burned down my own building? I think insurance fraud is common. I think you bought a property for $2,500 and might be looking to cash out. I don't have contents insurance. There's nothing to cash out. The officer made a note. We'll investigate, but without evidence, there's not much we can do. After he left, Ryan sat alone in the wreckage and tried to figure out his next move. The original documents from Marcus Chen were gone, destroyed in the fire. He still had the copies he'd made, hidden in his apartment, but the physical evidence was ash. The cars he'd saved were sitting in the parking lot, exposed to the elements. He had maybe $4,000 in the bank and a building that was now more dangerous than it had been when he'd bought it. His phone rang. Vanessa Sterling. I heard about the fire. Good news travels fast. Are you hurt? The question surprised him. Some cuts. Nothing serious. Good. A pause. This wasn't me. I know. How do you know? Because you told me you'd just throw me in the river. Arson's too subtle. Ryan laughed without humor. Also, burning down the warehouse destroys the evidence. Whoever did this wasn't thinking clearly. Or they were sending a message. Stop looking. Stop asking questions. Well, they've got my attention. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. My offer still stands. $75,000. Walk away. The building's not worth that anymore. I'm not buying the building. I'm buying your silence. Ryan looked at the charred walls, the collapsed roof, the cars sitting in the parking lot like refugees. He thought about Emma sleeping in their apartment, about Mrs. Chen's warning, about how easy it would be to just take the money and disappear. No, he said. Why not? Because walking away means whoever did this wins, and I'm tired of losing. Vanessa made a sound that might have been respect or exasperation. Then you're going to need help. Meet me tomorrow. Noon. There's a coffee shop on West Adams called Rosie's. Come alone. She hung up before Ryan could respond. He spent the rest of the day dealing with insurance adjusters and city inspectors. The building was now officially condemned. The city gave Ryan 30 days to either repair it to code or demolish it. The insurance payout would cover maybe a third of the repairs. Ryan called a contractor for an estimate. The guy took one look at the damage and shook his head. You're looking at $100,000 minimum. New roof, new framing, electrical, plumbing, bringing everything up to code. And that's if we don't find more problems once we start tearing into it. What if I do some of the work myself? You're a mechanic, not a contractor. No offense, but you'll probably kill yourself. I rebuilt a transmission with YouTube videos and a set of wrenches. I can learn framing. The contractor shrugged. It's your funeral, but the city's not going to sign off on anything you do yourself. You need permits, licensed electricians, inspectors. This isn't shade tree mechanics. This is a commercial building in a city that actually enforces codes. After he left, Ryan sat in the ruins and did math that didn't work. Even if he sold all 8 remaining cars immediately, even if he got top dollar for each one, he'd still be short. The warehouse was bleeding him dry faster than he could earn money. That night, Emma asked why he looked so tired. Just work stuff, monkey. Nothing to worry about. Did something happen to the cars? Ryan hesitated. He'd been trying to shield her from how bad things were, but she was too smart to fool. There was a fire at the warehouse. Some of the cars got damaged. Emma's face fell. The Chevelle. Yeah. Can you fix it? I don't think so, Em. It's pretty bad. She was quiet for a minute, pushing her dinner around her plate. Are we going to have to move again? No. We're staying right here. Promise? Ryan reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Promise. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, Ryan wondered if it was a promise he could keep. The next day he met Vanessa at Rosie's. The coffee shop was a hole-in-the-wall place in a neighborhood Ryan didn't know. All mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Vanessa was already there, sitting in the back corner with 2 cups of coffee. She'd traded her usual sharp suit for jeans and a sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked younger, almost approachable. Ryan slid into the seat across from her. You come here a lot? My father used to bring me here when I was a kid, before he got too important for places like this. She pushed one of the coffees toward Ryan. Black, no sugar, I'm guessing. Good guess. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with morning conversation. A guy with a laptop. Two women laughing over scones. Normal people living normal lives. I did some digging after our conversation, Vanessa said, finally. The people involved in the Riverside Development Fund aren't just my father's old business partners. They're current city officials, developers, investors, people with a lot to lose if that scandal resurfaces. How many people are we talking about? At least a dozen, maybe more. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printed documents, names, photos. These are the ones I could identify from the bank records you showed me. Most of them have gone legit since the 80s, or at least better at hiding their crimes. Ryan flipped through the pages. Aldermen, real estate developers, the CEO of a major construction firm, a federal judge. Jesus. Now you understand why they're desperate. If those documents you found go public, it's not just embarrassing. It's prison time for some of these people. So what do I do? Vanessa leaned back. You have three options. 1, go public. Release everything to the press. Watch your warehouse get seized, your life destroyed, and possibly get yourself killed. 2, give me the documents and walk away. Let me handle it. 3. She paused. 3, we work together like you suggested, but that means trusting me, and I'm not sure you're that stupid. Which option would you choose? Honestly, I take the money and disappear, but I'm not the one with a 9-year-old daughter depending on me. She met his eyes. You want to know what I think? I think you're in over your head. I think you stumbled into something you don't understand. And I think if you keep pushing, someone's going to get hurt. That's a pretty bleak assessment. It's a realistic assessment. My father played in a world where people disappeared when they became inconvenient. That world didn't go away when he died. It just got better at hiding. Ryan drank his coffee. It was bitter and too hot, and it burned going down. You said 3 options. What does working together actually look like? It looks like you stay quiet about the documents while I figure out who's threatening you. I have resources you don't. Connections, information. I can find out who set that fire. And in exchange? In exchange, you stop fighting my casino project. Let me buy the surrounding properties. Build around you if I have to. Just stop being an obstacle. That's it? You're not asking for the warehouse? The warehouse is worthless now. It'll take you 2 years to rebuild it, and by then my project will be done. I don't need your property. I need your cooperation. Ryan studied her. There was something different about her today. Less cold, more human, like she'd taken off a mask she usually wore. Why are you helping me? Vanessa looked down at her coffee. Because my father destroyed a lot of lives building his empire. Marcus Chen was just one of them. And because... She stopped. Because you remind me of someone. Who? My father. Before he became what he became. She smiled, sad and thin. He used to fix cars, too. Did you know that? Before the money and the power and the corruption, he had a little garage in Bridgeport. He'd come home every night covered in grease, smelling like oil and gasoline. My mother hated it, but he was happy. What changed? He figured out people were easier to manipulate than machines, and more profitable. Vanessa finished her coffee. So, do we have a deal? Ryan thought about it. Trusting Vanessa Sterling went against every instinct he had. But she was right about one thing. He was in over his head, and fighting alone wasn't working. Okay, he said. We work together, but I keep the copies of the documents. Insurance. Fair enough. She stood and dropped a 20 on the table. I'll be in touch. And Ryan? Watch your back. Whoever set that fire isn't done. She left. Ryan sat in the coffee shop for another hour, drinking bad coffee and wondering if he'd just made a deal with the devil or found an unlikely ally. The next week was a nightmare of reconstruction. Ryan hired a crew of day laborers to help clear the debris. They worked for cash under the table, no questions asked. Together, they hauled out burned timber, Twisted metal, shattered glass. The warehouse slowly transformed from a disaster zone to a blank slate. Ryan worked alongside them, 16 hours a day, his hands bleeding through the work gloves. At night, he'd go home to Emma, help with homework, read her bedtime stories, and then lie awake calculating how much money he was burning through and how much time he had left. The cars became his lifeline. He moved them to a storage facility he couldn't afford and worked on them in the evenings. The Plymouth Roadrunner was his focus now. It was the most valuable car left, and if he could finish it, the profit would buy him another month. But parts were expensive, and shipping was slow. Ryan spent hours on the phone with salvage yards across the country, haggling over prices, begging for payment plans. One yard in Nevada agreed to front him parts in exchange for a percentage of the sale. It was a terrible deal, but Ryan didn't have options. Emma noticed he was stressed. "Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah, monkey, just busy. Mrs. Chen says you look sick." Mrs. Chen needs to mind her own business. But Ryan looked at himself in the bathroom mirror that night and understood what she meant. He'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. His hand shook when he held a coffee cup. He was running on fumes. 2 weeks after the fire, Vanessa called. "I found something. Meet me at the warehouse tonight, 10 o'clock. She arrived in the Mercedes, alone as promised. The warehouse was still a gutted shell, but Ryan had set up temporary lights so he could work at night. In the harsh LED glow, Vanessa looked tired too. "I've been asking questions," she said without preamble. Quietly, carefully. "And I found someone willing to talk." "Who?" "A retired cop who worked the Marcus Chen case in 1988. He's old now, sick, dying actually, and he wants to clear his conscience before he goes." "What did he say?" Vanessa pulled out her phone and played a recording. An old man's voice, weak and crackling, filled the warehouse. "They told us Chen's death was suicide, but it wasn't. We all knew it wasn't. The autopsy was wrong. The scene was staged. But we got the word from above. Close the case. Move on. So we did." Ryan listened, his chest tight. The voice continued. "There were 3 men responsible. I never got their names, but they worked for Sterling, Richard Sterling. He gave the order, and they made it happen. Chen knew too much. He had evidence, so they killed him and made it look like he jumped." The recording ended. Vanessa put her phone away. "So your father definitely killed Marcus Chen?" "Yes." "And you're okay with that?" Vanessa's face was unreadable. "My father was a monster. I've known that for a long time. But he's dead now. The people who helped him aren't." "The cop give you any names?" "One, Thomas Garrett. He was a mid-level developer in the 80s. Now he's a city alderman, controls zoning permits for the South Side." Ryan felt something click into place. "Let me guess. Your casino project needs his approval." "Every major development does, and Garrett's been blocking me for 6 months. Keeps finding reasons to delay the permits. I thought it was just politics." Vanessa leaned against the workbench. "But now I think he's afraid. He knows I'm buying up properties in the Riverside district. He knows about the cars, and he's worried I'll find what my father hid." "But you didn't know about the documents until I found them." "No, but Garrett doesn't know that." She looked at Ryan. "I think he's the one who set the fire, or hired someone to do it." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it." Vanessa pushed off the workbench. "In the meantime, you need to be careful. If Garrett thinks you have evidence against him, he'll escalate." "What's escalate look like?" "Ask Marcus Chen." After Vanessa left, Ryan sat in the empty warehouse and felt the weight of it crushing down on him. He'd wanted to build something honest, something clean, a business where he worked with his hands and earned an honest living. Instead, he'd stepped into a decades-old murder, a web of corruption, and a fight he wasn't equipped to win. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma's asking about you. When are you coming home?" Ryan looked at the time. Almost midnight. He'd promised Emma he'd read to her before bed, and he'd missed it again. He locked up the warehouse and went home. Emma was asleep when he got there, curled up under her blankets with a book on her chest. Ryan picked it up carefully. Charlotte's Web. She'd been reading it for a week, savoring each chapter. He sat on the edge of her bed and just watched her breathe. Her face was peaceful in sleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow. She looked like Sarah. The same delicate features, the same small nose. Ryan thought about what he was risking, not just the warehouse or the cars or his reputation. His daughter. If Thomas Garrett was willing to kill once, he'd do it again. And if Ryan kept pushing, if he kept digging, Emma could get caught in the crossfire. The smart thing would be to walk away. Take Vanessa's offer. Disappear. But then he thought about Marcus Chen, murdered for trying to expose the truth, about the evidence hidden in a car for 30 years, about all the people who'd been hurt by Richard Sterling and his partners and never got justice. Ryan couldn't walk away. Not anymore. He kissed Emma's forehead and went back to work. The Plymouth Roadrunner came together faster than the previous cars. Ryan had learned from his mistakes, streamlined his process. He worked on it every spare moment, sometimes through the night when he couldn't sleep. The engine rebuild took 2 weeks. The transmission, 1 week. The bodywork was rougher, but he was getting better at metal fabrication. 6 weeks after the fire, the Roadrunner was done. Ryan posted it on collector forums and got responses within hours. The highest offer came from a dealer in Texas, $42,000. Ryan negotiated up to $45,000 and sold it on the spot. The money went straight into the warehouse. New roof, new electrical panel, proper insulation. Ryan hired licensed contractors for the work the city required, then did everything else himself. He framed walls, ran conduit, patched holes in the concrete floor. Mrs. Chen brought Emma by on weekends, and his daughter helped paint the office area Ryan was building in the corner. "This is going to be a real shop," Emma said, carefully rolling paint onto the drywall. "Like on TV. Maybe not that fancy, but yeah, a real shop. With a sign? Eventually. What's it going to say?" Ryan hadn't thought about it. "I don't know, Monkey. What do you think?" Emma considered this seriously. Maddox Restoration. Because that's your name. And that's what you do. You restore things. Ryan smiled. "I like it." They painted until Emma's arms got tired, then went for ice cream. It was a good day, the first good day Ryan had had in months. But that night, the threats started. Anonymous calls to his phone. No one on the other end, just breathing and then silence. Text messages from unknown numbers. Stop asking questions. Stop digging. Walk away while you can. Ryan changed his number. The threats followed him to the new one. He told Vanessa. She told him to document everything and keep his head down. She was still investigating Thomas Garrett, but it was slow going. The man was careful, connected, untouchable. "I'm working on it," Vanessa said, "but these things take time." "I don't have time." "Then make time, or walk away." Ryan couldn't walk away. Not now. He'd come too far. He moved on to the next car. A 1970 Mustang Mach 1. It needed everything, but the bones were good. Ryan threw himself into the work, using it to distract himself from the threats, from the fear, from the constant feeling that someone was watching him. Because someone was. Ryan started noticing the same black SUV parked across the street from the warehouse. Different times, different days, but always the same vehicle. He couldn't see inside through the tinted windows, but he knew someone was there. He confronted them once, walked straight up to the SUV and banged on the window. The vehicle peeled away before he could get a look at the driver. The next day, Emma was followed home from school. Mrs. Chen called Ryan in a panic. A man was watching her standing across the street from the school. When I picked Emma up, he followed us. Not close, but he followed. I took a different route home, and he stayed with us for 3 blocks before he turned off. Ryan's blood went cold. Did Emma see him? I don't think so, but Ryan, this is serious. Someone is targeting your daughter. Ryan was at Mrs. Chen's apartment in 10 minutes. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, oblivious. Ryan hugged her tight and tried to keep his voice steady. "Hey, Monkey. Everything okay at school today?" "Yeah, we had a math test. I think I got a B." "That's great." He looked at Mrs. Chen over Emma's head. The old woman's face was pale. Ryan stayed with them until bedtime, then walked Mrs. Chen into the hallway. "I'm calling the police," he said. "And telling them what? That a man stood outside a school? That a car drove behind me? They won't do anything without proof." "Then I'll get proof." "Ryan, you need to end this. Whatever you're involved in, it's not worth putting Emma in danger." "I know." Ryan's hands were shaking. I know. He called Vanessa from the hallway, barely keeping his voice down. They followed my daughter. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm accelerating my timeline. Give me 48 hours. I don't have 48 hours. Then make them. Keep Emma somewhere safe. Don't go to the warehouse alone. And Ryan? Her voice softened. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd go after her. You didn't think? These are the people who killed Marcus Chen. What did you think they'd do? Vanessa didn't have an answer. Ryan hung up and slid down the wall, sitting in the hallway with his head in his hands. He'd been so focused on the warehouse, on building something, on proving he could succeed that he'd forgotten the most important thing. Emma was all that mattered. Everything else was worthless if she got hurt. He made a decision right there in the hallway. Tomorrow, he'd contact Thomas Garrett directly, offer him the documents, end this before anyone else got hurt. But when tomorrow came, Ryan's phone rang with news that changed everything. Thomas Garrett was dead. The news hit Chicago media like a bomb. City Alderman Thomas Garrett found dead in his Lincoln Park home. No signs of forced entry. Apparent suicide. A single gunshot wound to the head, his service weapon on the floor beside him. Police were investigating, but calling it an open and shut case. Ryan read the article 3 times on his phone, standing in Mrs. Chen's kitchen while Emma ate breakfast. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dad, you're spilling your coffee. Ryan looked down. Brown liquid was pooling on the counter. He set the mug down and grabbed a towel. Sorry, monkey. Just clumsy this morning. Emma gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but she went back to her cereal. Ryan stepped into the hallway and called Vanessa. Did you do this? Good morning to you too. Her voice was sharp. And no, I didn't kill Thomas Garrett. But you knew something was going to happen. You told me to give you 48 hours. I was planning to confront him with evidence, not put a bullet in his head. Vanessa paused. Though I can't say I'm mourning the loss. This isn't funny. Someone just died. Someone who was threatening your daughter. Someone who helped murder Marcus Chen. Forgive me if I don't shed tears. Her voice softened slightly. But no, Ryan, I didn't do this. And I don't think it was suicide either. What do you mean? Garrett was a coward. Cowards don't eat their guns. They run. They make deals. They throw other people under the bus to save themselves. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Someone killed him to keep him quiet, which means there are more players in this game than we thought. Ryan leaned against the wall. So what now? Now you lay low. Whoever killed Garrett might come after you next, or they might think the problem's solved and back off. Either way, you need to disappear for a few days. I can't disappear. I have a daughter. I have work. You have a target on your back. Take Emma somewhere safe. I'll handle things on my end. She hung up before Ryan could argue. He stood in the hallway listening to Emma humming in the kitchen and tried to figure out how to tell a 9-year-old they needed to leave town without terrifying her. The decision got made for him. Ryan drove Emma to school that morning and spotted the same black SUV parked 2 blocks away. Same tinted windows. Same predatory stillness. When Ryan pulled away from the school, the SUV followed. Ryan's heart was hammering. He took a right turn. The SUV followed. Another right. Still following. Ryan drove in circles for 10 minutes, the SUV always 3 or 4 cars back, never getting closer but never leaving. Finally, Ryan pulled into a police station parking lot. The SUV drove past without slowing down. Ryan sat there for 20 minutes, watching the street, but it didn't come back. He called the school and told them Emma was being picked up early due to a family emergency. Then he called Mrs. Chen. I need a favor. A big one. 2 hours later, Ryan and Emma were on a Greyhound bus heading south. Emma thought it was an adventure. Ryan had told her they were visiting an old friend in Indianapolis for a few days, a spontaneous road trip. She'd packed her backpack with books and snacks and was currently pressed against the window, watching Illinois farmland roll past. How long are we staying? Just a few days, maybe a week. What about school? I'll email your teacher. You can make up the work. Emma nodded, satisfied. She pulled out Charlotte's Web and started reading. Ryan watched her and felt his chest tighten. She trusted him completely. She had no idea they were running from people who'd already killed at least 2 people. They weren't actually going to Indianapolis. Ryan had bought tickets there as a decoy, but they'd get off in a small town called Bloomfield and lay low until Vanessa gave him the all clear. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all Ryan had. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "Good call leaving town. Stay gone until I contact you." And Ryan? "Ditch your phone. They might be tracking it." Ryan stared at the message. Ditch his phone meant losing contact with everyone. Vanessa, Mrs. Chen, the outside world. It meant being truly alone, but it also meant being invisible. At the next stop, Ryan bought a prepaid phone from a gas station and texted Vanessa the new number. Then he powered down his regular phone, removed the SIM card, and threw both pieces in separate trash cans. They got off in Bloomfield just after sunset. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where the main street was 3 blocks long and the biggest employer was a grain elevator. Ryan found a motel on the edge of town that took cash and didn't ask questions. The room was depressing. 2 beds with sagging mattresses, a TV that only got 4 channels, wallpaper peeling in the corners. But it was clean and anonymous and far from Chicago. Emma sat on her bed and looked around. "This place smells weird. It's just old. We won't be here long. Can we get pizza?" They walked to a diner down the street and ate cheeseburgers while Emma talked about school and her friends and how she was definitely going to ace her next math test. Ryan tried to focus on her words, but his mind kept drifting to Thomas Garrett's body, to the black SUV, to all the ways this could go wrong. "Dad, you're not listening," Ryan snapped back. "Sorry, monkey. What did you say?" "I said Mrs. Chen is teaching me how to cook dumplings. The real way, not from frozen. Can we make them when we get home?" "Yeah, definitely." Emma smiled, and Ryan felt like the worst father in the world. She deserved better than this. Better than running. Better than a father who dragged her into something dangerous because he was too stubborn to walk away. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Ryan sat by the window and watched the empty street. Every car that passed made his pulse spike. Every sound in the hallway made him reach for the tire iron he'd brought from the warehouse. His new phone buzzed. Vanessa. Made progress. Found someone willing to talk. Call me when you can. Ryan stepped outside and called from the motel parking lot. "What did you find?" Thomas Garrett had a business partner. Another developer from the 80s named Lawrence Pike. I tracked him down to a nursing home in Naperville. He's 83, mostly blind, and apparently very chatty when you bring him good scotch. "What did he tell you?" "Everything. The Riverside Development Fund was a Ponzi scheme from the start. My father and Garrett and Pike, and at least 8 others were all in on it. They took investor money, made some legitimate deals, then siphoned off the rest into shell companies. When Chen figured it out and threatened to expose them, they made him disappear." Ryan paced the parking lot. "So your father definitely ordered the hit." "Yes, but here's the interesting part. According to Pike, Chen didn't just hide documents. He hid something else, something physical. Evidence that couldn't be destroyed or denied." "What kind of evidence?" Pike didn't know, just that Chen was obsessed with insurance policies. He didn't trust banks or lawyers, so he hid everything physical. The documents were just one part of it. Ryan thought about the cars lined up in the warehouse. "You think he hid something else in the vehicles?" "I think it's possible. And I think whoever killed Garrett thinks so too, which means they're not done searching." "But the warehouse burned. If there was something else hidden, it's gone." "Maybe. Or maybe it survived. Either way, you need to stay hidden until I can figure out who else is involved. Pike gave me names, but some of them are dead or senile. I'm still putting the pieces together." Ryan looked back at the motel room where Emma was sleeping. "How long?" "A week? Maybe 2. I don't have 2 weeks. I'm running out of money. I'll wire you cash. Give me an account number." "I don't want your money, Vanessa. Don't be stupid. You can't protect your daughter if you're broke." Her voice softened. "Let me help, Ryan. It's the least I can do after dragging you into this mess." Ryan gave her the account information. Vanessa promised to transfer $5,000 by morning. "Thank you," Ryan said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." The next week dragged by like a prison sentence. Ryan and Emma fell into a routine. Breakfast at the diner, afternoons at a park on the edge of town, Evenings watching bad TV in the motel room. Emma seemed happy enough, treating it like a vacation, but Ryan could see the cracks forming. She asked about Mrs. Chen, about her friends, about when they were going home. Soon, monkey, I promise. But Ryan didn't know if that was true. Vanessa called every other day with updates. She'd identified 6 more people connected to the Riverside Development Fund, all still alive, all still active in Chicago business. 2 of them were major political donors. One was a retired judge. Another owned a construction company that had built half the new developments in the city. These people have everything to lose, Vanessa said. If the full story comes out, it doesn't just destroy reputations. It invalidates contracts, opens lawsuits, triggers criminal investigations. We're talking about billions of dollars and dozens of careers. So they'll do anything to keep it buried. Exactly. Ryan spent his days trying to keep Emma entertained and his nights researching the people Vanessa had identified. He used the motel's ancient computer in the lobby, reading news articles and business records, trying to understand who he was up against. The more he learned, the more hopeless it felt. These weren't street thugs or low-level criminals. These were people with power, money, and connections. They could make Ryan disappear with a phone call, but they hadn't, which meant something was holding them back. Ryan was thinking about this late one night when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Maddox? The voice was male, smooth, cultured. My name is Lawrence Pike. I believe Vanessa Sterling mentioned me. Ryan sat up straight. How did you get this number? I have my resources. Don't worry, I'm not calling to threaten you. Quite the opposite. I'd like to help. Why would you help me? Because I'm dying, Mr. Maddox. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months if I'm lucky. And before I go, I'd like to do one decent thing with my miserable life. Pike coughed wetly. I was part of what happened to Marcus Chen. I didn't pull the trigger, but I knew what Richard Sterling was planning, and I said nothing. I've lived with that guilt for 30 years. I'd like to make it right. Ryan walked outside, away from the motel room where Emma was sleeping. What do you want from me? I want to give you something. Information, evidence, proof that can't be denied or destroyed. Meet me tomorrow. There's a rest stop on I-57, mile marker 283. 2 in the afternoon. Come alone. How do I know this isn't a trap? You don't. But what choice do you have? The line went dead. Ryan stood in the parking lot, staring at his phone. Every instinct screamed trap. But Pike was right. What choice did he have? He called Vanessa. Did you give Lawrence Pike my number? No, why would I? She paused. He contacted you. He wants to meet. Says he has evidence. Ryan, don't. Pike's old and he's dying, but he's not trustworthy. He was part of the original scheme. He could be setting you up. Or he could be genuine. You said he told you everything. He told me what he wanted me to know. That doesn't mean he's on your side. Ryan looked back at the motel room, at the dim light behind the curtains where his daughter was sleeping. I have to try. If Pike has evidence that can end this, I need it. Then let me come with you. He said, come alone. And you're just going to trust him? No, but I'm going anyway. Vanessa was silent for a long moment. You're an idiot. I've been told. If this goes wrong, make sure Emma's taken care of. Mrs. Chen's contact information is in my phone. She'll know what to do. Ryan, I mean it, Vanessa. Promise me. Another pause, then, I promise. Ryan hung up and went back inside. Emma was sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the edge, breathing deep and even. Ryan sat on his own bed and watched her sleep, memorizing every detail. The curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell across her face, the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off a swing at age 5. If tomorrow went wrong, this might be the last time he saw her. The next morning, Ryan told Emma he had to run an errand and would be back by dinner. He asked the motel manager's wife to watch her for a few hours and paid her $50. The woman seemed nice enough, and Emma liked her, so Ryan felt marginally less terrible about leaving. The drive to the rest stop took an hour. It was one of those generic highway stops with a gas station, a McDonald's, and parking lots on both sides of the building. Ryan pulled into the truck lot and waited. 2 o'clock came and went. No Lawrence Pike. Ryan was about to leave when a black town car pulled up beside him. The driver got out and opened the rear door. An old man emerged, moving slowly with a cane. He was thin to the point of skeletal, his suit hanging off his frame like a tent, but his eyes were sharp. Lawrence Pike. "Mr. Maddox, thank you for coming." They sat at a picnic table behind the rest stop, away from the crowds. Pike moved like every step hurt, but he waved off Ryan's offer to help. "I don't have much time, so I'll be brief. The documents you found in Marcus Chen's car are real, but they're incomplete. Chen hid the most damaging evidence somewhere else." "Where?" "I don't know. None of us did. That's why we could never find it." Pike pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. "But I know what he hid. Not just financial records. Physical evidence. Ledgers in Chen's handwriting. Photographs of meetings. Recorded conversations. Proof that Richard Sterling and the rest of us conspired to commit fraud and murder." Ryan took the envelope. Inside were photocopies of bank records, handwritten notes, photographs of men in suits shaking hands. The dates ranged from 1985 to 1988. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only person stubborn enough to use it. Vanessa Sterling wants to protect her father's legacy. The police won't touch this without ironclad proof. But you?" Pike smiled, thin and bitter. "You don't care about politics or reputations. You just want the truth. That makes you dangerous." "Who killed Thomas Garrett?" "I don't know for certain. But if I had to guess, one of the other investors. Someone who realized Garrett was about to crack under pressure and decided to eliminate the problem." Pike coughed again, harder this time. When he pulled his hand away, there was blood on his palm. "They're tying up loose ends, Mr. Maddox. Garrett was just the first." "Are you in danger?" "I'm already dead. The cancer will finish me before anyone else gets the chance." Pike stood slowly. "But you need to be careful. Find what Chen hid. Use it. Burn them all down. It's the only way this ends." He walked back to the town car and drove away, leaving Ryan alone with an envelope full of evidence and more questions than answers. Ryan drove back to the motel in a daze. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Pike's words kept echoing in his head. Find what Chen hid. But where? The warehouse had burned. The cars had been searched dozens of times. If there was something else, Ryan had no idea where to look. Emma was watching cartoons when he got back. She looked up and smiled. "How was your errand?" "Fine, monkey. Just boring adult stuff." "The manager's wife made me cookies." "That was nice of her." Emma went back to her cartoons. Ryan sat on his bed and stared at Pike's envelope. Inside were pieces of a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. Evidence of crimes committed before Ryan was born. Names he didn't recognize. Meetings that happened in rooms he'd never seen. But somewhere in this mess was the key to ending it. That night, Vanessa called. "How did it go?" "Pike gave me more evidence, but he says Chen hid something else. Something physical we haven't found yet." "Where?" "He doesn't know, but it's somewhere connected to the cars or the warehouse." Vanessa was quiet. "The cars have been searched multiple times. If there was something hidden, someone would have found it by now." "Unless we're looking in the wrong place." "What do you mean?" Ryan thought about it. Chen was smart. He knew people would search the cars, so maybe he hid it somewhere else. Somewhere connected to the warehouse, but not obvious. "Like where?" "I don't know yet, but I need to go back." "Ryan, you can't go back. It's not safe." "Then it's never going to be safe. These people aren't going to stop until they find what Chen hid, which means I need to find it first. And if you get killed, then make sure Emma's taken care of." Ryan paused. "I'm going back tomorrow, with or without your help." Vanessa swore in a language Ryan didn't recognize. "Fine, I'll meet you there, but we're doing this smart. No heroics, no stupid risks. Deal." Ryan hung up and looked at Emma. She'd fallen asleep on her bed, still in her clothes, the TV still playing. He turned it off and covered her with a blanket. Tomorrow he'd take her back to Mrs. Chen's. Then he'd go back to the warehouse and find whatever Marcus Chen had hidden 30 years ago. Or die trying. The drive back to Chicago took most of the next day. Emma chattered the whole way, happy to be going home, completely unaware of the danger they were heading back into. Ryan let her talk, responding when necessary, but his mind was elsewhere. He dropped Emma at Mrs. Chen's just after sunset. The old woman opened the door and pulled Emma into a hug before turning a sharp look on Ryan. You look terrible. It's been a long week. Emma told me you've been having adventures. She seems to think this was a vacation. Let her think that. It's better than the truth. Mrs. Chen studied him. You're going to do something stupid, aren't you? Probably. Don't get yourself killed. That child needs her father. Ryan hugged Emma goodbye and promised to see her tomorrow. She made him pinky swear, and Ryan held onto her small hand and hoped it wasn't a lie. He met Vanessa at the warehouse at midnight. She arrived in jeans and a dark jacket, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked like a completely different person from the CEO in designer suits. In her hand was a heavy-duty flashlight. This is a terrible idea, she said by way of greeting. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. If you get killed, I'd feel responsible. She walked past him into the warehouse. So, where do we start? Ryan had been thinking about this all day. Chen owned this property for 15 years before he died. He knew every inch of it. If he hid something, it's somewhere permanent, somewhere that wouldn't be disturbed by normal use. The foundation? Maybe, or the walls, or underground. They spent the next 4 hours searching. Vanessa examined the walls, looking for hollow spaces or hidden panels. Ryan checked the floor, looking for seams or patches that might indicate something buried beneath. They found nothing but concrete and steel and disappointment. It was nearly 4 a.m. when Vanessa sat down on Ryan's workbench, exhausted. This is pointless. If there was something here, the fire destroyed it. Ryan was about to agree when something caught his eye. A section of wall near the collapsed loading dock. The metal siding was newer than the rest, shinier, like it had been replaced. He walked over and ran his hand along the seam. The panels were riveted in place, but the rivets looked wrong, too clean, too uniform. Vanessa, come look at this. She joined him, shining her flashlight on the wall. What am I looking at? This panel was replaced, recently, within the last few years. So, buildings get repaired all the time. Not this building. According to the property records, no one's done maintenance here since 2005. This panel is newer than that. Vanessa's eyes widened. You think Chen replaced it? Before he died? Or someone else did? After? Ryan grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox. Help me pull it down. The rivets came out easily. Too easily. They weren't real rivets at all, just decorative caps over screws. Ryan and Vanessa pulled the panel free and shone the flashlight into the gap behind it. There was a metal box welded to the interior support beam. Old, rusted, locked with a combination padlock that had long since seized up. Ryan's heart was pounding. That's it. That has to be it. He used bolt cutters to snap the lock. The box opened with a screech of protesting metal. Inside were 3 items: a leather-bound ledger, a stack of cassette tapes, and a sealed plastic bag containing dozens of photographs. Ryan pulled out the ledger and opened it. Every page was filled with handwritten notes in tight, precise script. Dates, names, amounts, meetings documented in meticulous detail. Richard Sterling's name appeared on nearly every page. Vanessa picked up one of the cassette tapes. We need to listen to these. I don't have a cassette player. I do. In my car. They drove to a parking garage downtown where Vanessa kept her personal vehicles. One of them was a restored 1985 Mercedes with an original tape deck. She plugged in the cassette and pressed play. Marcus Chen's voice filled the car. This is recording 17, April 12, 1987, meeting with Richard Sterling and Thomas Garrett regarding Riverside Development Fund investor payouts. The recording was 40 minutes long. Chen had hidden a recorder in the meeting room and captured everything. Sterling's voice was clear. So was Garrett's. They talked about siphoning money, falsifying reports, bribing city officials. It was damning, irrefutable. There were 8 more tapes, each one worse than the last. By the time the sun came up, Ryan and Vanessa had listened to everything. They sat in the Mercedes in silence, processing what they'd heard. This destroys everyone, Vanessa said finally. Not just my father. All of them. That was the point. If we release this, it'll be a scandal that makes Watergate look like a parking ticket. Ryan looked at her. Is that a problem? Vanessa met his eyes. My father was a monster, but he's dead. The people on these tapes aren't. Some of them are my clients, my business partners, people I've worked with for years, people who had Marcus Chen murdered. Yes. So what are you saying? We bury this? Vanessa was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head. No, we don't bury it. We use it, but we do it smart. We find a journalist we can trust. Someone who'll investigate properly, verify everything, build a case so airtight no one can deny it. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we keep you and Emma safe. She started the car. I know a place, a property I own outside the city. You can stay there until this breaks. Once the story goes public, you'll be protected. They can't touch you without exposing themselves. Ryan thought about it. It made sense, but it also meant trusting Vanessa completely, putting his life and his daughter's life in her hands. Why are you doing this? He asked. Really? You could have walked away a dozen times. Why haven't you? Vanessa stared through the windshield at the concrete walls of the parking garage. Because I spent my whole life building an empire on my father's foundation, and now I know that foundation is built on corpses. If I walk away now, I'm just as bad as he was. She looked at Ryan. Maybe this is my chance to do something that matters. Something real. Ryan nodded. Okay, let's do it. They drove back to the warehouse, packed up the evidence, and loaded it into Vanessa's trunk. Then Ryan went to Mrs. Chen's to pick up Emma. The old woman answered the door with flour on her hands and worry in her eyes. You're still alive. Barely. Are you leaving again? For a little while, just until things settle down. Mrs. Chen grabbed his arm. Ryan, be careful. Whatever you're doing, it's not worth dying for. It's worth living for. That's enough. He collected Emma and her backpack. She hugged Mrs. Chen goodbye and promised to practice her dumpling folding technique. Then Ryan drove her to the address Vanessa had given him. It was a small house on 2 acres in a town called Geneva, 40 miles west of Chicago. Far enough to be safe, close enough to stay connected. Vanessa was already there, unpacking groceries in the kitchen. Emma looked around with wide eyes. Are we staying here? For a little while, monkey. It's like a vacation house. Kind of. Emma ran off to explore. Ryan and Vanessa stood in the kitchen, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them. I contacted a journalist, Vanessa said, someone I trust. She's willing to meet tomorrow. Then we do this. Ryan looked out the window at Emma running around the backyard, carefree and innocent. He thought about Marcus Chen, about Thomas Garrett, about all the people who'd been hurt by the men on those tapes. This ended tomorrow, one way or another. The journalist's name was Karen Mills, and she'd been investigating corruption in Chicago politics for 20 years. Vanessa had worked with her before on a housing discrimination story that had brought down 2 aldermen and a real estate firm. If anyone could be trusted with evidence this explosive, it was her. They met in a conference room at Mills' newspaper office downtown. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much bullshit to be impressed by anything. She looked at Ryan like he was a puzzle she hadn't decided whether to solve. Vanessa says you've got something that'll blow up the city. Ryan slid the ledger across the table. Marcus Chen documented everything. Names, dates, amounts, 30 years of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. And we have recordings to back it up. Mills opened the ledger and read for 5 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up at Vanessa. Your father's all over this. I know. This destroys his reputation, everything he built. I know that too. Mills studied Vanessa for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. I'll need to verify everything. Cross-reference the bank records, confirm the voices on the tapes, track down witnesses. That takes time. How much time? Ryan asked. A month. Maybe 6 weeks. I don't have 6 weeks. People are already dead because of this. Then they'll stay dead whether I publish tomorrow or next month. But if I rush this and get even one detail wrong, the whole thing falls apart. These people have lawyers that'll tear apart anything that isn't airtight. Mills closed the ledger. You want this done right or done fast? Ryan looked at Vanessa. She nodded slightly. Done right, Ryan said. Mills promised to keep them updated and told them to stay out of sight. The fewer people who knew about the evidence before publication, the better. Ryan and Vanessa left through a back exit, and Ryan felt the weight of waiting settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. 6 weeks, 42 days of hiding, hoping no one found them, praying Emma stayed safe. It felt like forever. They settled into a routine at the Geneva house. Vanessa drove back to the city most days to handle her business and check on Mills's progress. Ryan stayed with Emma, cooking meals, helping with homework, trying to pretend everything was normal. Emma seemed happy enough. She liked the house, liked having a yard to run around in, liked that her dad was home every day instead of working 18-hour shifts at the warehouse. But she wasn't stupid. "Dad, why are we really here?" Ryan was making spaghetti when Emma asked. He'd known this conversation was coming, had been dreading it, but now that it was here, he didn't have a good answer prepared. "It's complicated, monkey." That's what adults say when they don't want to tell the truth. Ryan turned off the stove and sat down at the kitchen table. Emma joined him, her expression serious. "You're right. I haven't been completely honest with you." Ryan took a breath. "The warehouse got mixed up in some bad business. Things that happened a long time ago before you were born. And some people are angry about it, so we're staying here until it gets sorted out." "Are we in danger?" Ryan wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything was fine, nothing to worry about, just a precaution. But Emma deserved better than that. "We were. I think we're safe now, but I'm being careful anyway." Emma nodded slowly. "Is that why we went to that motel? And why you've been acting weird?" "Yeah." "Okay." She stood up and gave him a hug. "I trust you, Dad. Whatever's happening, I know you'll fix it." Ryan held her tight and hoped she was right. The days bled together. Ryan worked on the Mustang Mach-1 in Vanessa's garage, losing himself in the mechanical simplicity of rebuilding an engine. Vanessa brought updates from Mills every few days. The journalist was making progress, verifying sources, building the case. It was slow but thorough. 3 weeks in, Lawrence Pike died. The obituary was short and unremarkable. Beloved father and grandfather, successful businessman, died peacefully surrounded by family. No mention of his role in Marcus Chen's murder. No mention of the Riverside Development Fund. Ryan wondered if Pike's family knew what he'd been, if they'd cared, if confession at the end of a life made up for the sins committed during it. 4 weeks in, another name from the ledger died. Stephen Wainwright, retired construction magnate, killed in a single-car accident on Lakeshore Drive. His Mercedes had drifted into a concrete barrier at 70 miles per hour. Police suspected he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Vanessa didn't think it was an accident. They're cleaning house. Everyone who knows about the fund is becoming a liability. How many people are left? On our list? 6. Maybe 7 if you count the ones we're not sure about. Ryan felt sick. We're getting people killed just by investigating this. They're getting themselves killed by being part of it. Don't blame yourself for their choices. But Ryan did blame himself. Every death felt like blood on his hands. 5 weeks in, Mills called with news. She'd finished verification and was ready to publish. The story would run in Sunday's paper, front page, with a simultaneous online release. She'd coordinated with federal prosecutors who were prepared to open investigations the moment the story broke. "This is happening," Mills said. "Are you ready?" Ryan wasn't sure anyone could be ready for what was about to happen, but he said yes anyway. The story dropped at midnight on Saturday. By sunrise, it was everywhere. Front page of every Chicago paper. Lead story on every news website. Cable news picked it up within hours. By noon, federal agents were conducting raids across the city. Ryan watched it unfold from Vanessa's house, Emma curled up beside him on the couch, both of them glued to the television. The headline was simple and devastating: decades of fraud and murder uncovered in Chicago real estate scandal. Mills had done her job well. The story laid out everything: the Riverside Development Fund scheme, the missing millions, the investors who'd been defrauded. Richard Sterling's central role. Thomas Garrett's involvement. Marcus Chen's murder. The cover-up that had lasted 30 years. The recordings were published online. Ryan heard his own voice on the clips, talking to Mills about finding the evidence. But mostly, he heard the voices of dead men confessing to crimes they'd thought would stay buried forever. By evening, 3 more arrests had been made. A sitting alderman, a former city comptroller, a real estate developer who'd built half of Lincoln Park. The mayor held a press conference calling it the darkest chapter in Chicago's history. Federal prosecutors promised more indictments were coming, and Ryan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews, lawyers wanted statements. Someone claiming to be from Marcus Chen's family wanted to thank him. Ryan ignored all of it. He'd done what he'd set out to do. The truth was out. The rest wasn't his problem. Vanessa came over that night with a bottle of expensive whiskey and 3 steaks. "You're a celebrity," she said, firing up the grill in the backyard. "Mills is already talking about a book deal, movie rights, the whole circus." "I don't want any of that." "Tough. You don't get to choose what happens next. You lit the match. Now you deal with the fire." Emma was inside watching a movie. Ryan and Vanessa stood by the grill, watching smoke rise into the darkening sky. "What happens to your company?" Ryan asked. "Honestly, I don't know. Sterling Development is going to take a hit. My father's name is poison now. Some clients will drop me. Some projects will fall through." She flipped the stakes. "But I'll survive. I always do." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. This was the right thing to do. I'm just realizing that doing the right thing is expensive." They ate dinner in comfortable silence. Emma talked about school and her friends and how she couldn't wait to go home. Ryan realized with a jolt that he'd almost forgotten what normal felt like. After Emma went to bed, Vanessa and Ryan sat on the back porch with glasses of whiskey. "What are you going to do now?" Vanessa asked. "Go back to Chicago, finish fixing up the warehouse, build my business." "The casino project is dead, you know. The permits were all tied up with people who are now under federal indictment. It'll be years before anyone can develop that district." "Good. Means I won't have you trying to buy me out anymore." Vanessa laughed. "Fair point." She looked at him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another desperate guy who'd gotten in over his head. But you're tougher than you look." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." She swirled her whiskey. "You could have walked away a dozen times, taken my money, protected yourself, but you didn't." "I'm stubborn." "You're principled. There's a difference." Vanessa finished her drink. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't sell. The world needs more people who give a damn about doing the right thing." Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The next morning, federal agents showed up at the house. Ryan's heart stopped when he saw the black SUVs pull into the driveway, but the agents were friendly. They wanted statements, needed Ryan to testify before a grand jury, asked if he'd be willing to cooperate with the investigation. Ryan said yes to everything. The lead agent, a woman named Torres, shook his hand before leaving. "You did a brave thing, Mr. Maddox. Most people wouldn't have pushed this hard. You saved a lot of people from getting hurt by these criminals." "I didn't do it to be brave. I did it because they were coming after my daughter." Torres nodded. "Best reason there is." After they left, Ryan sat Emma down and explained what was going to happen. There would be more questions, maybe more interviews. People would recognize them. Life would be weird for a while. "Are we safe now?" Emma asked. "Yeah, monkey, we're safe." "Can we go home?" "Soon. I promise." They went back to Chicago 2 days later. Mrs. Chen cried when she saw them, pulling Emma into a hug that lasted a full minute. "You stupid, stupid man," she said to Ryan. "I thought you were going to get yourself killed." "I thought so too. But you didn't. So I suppose you're less stupid than I feared." Well, Ryan laughed, and it felt good. The warehouse was still standing, half repaired, waiting for him. Ryan walked through it that evening, running his hands along the new walls, checking the roof repairs, looking at the cars still waiting for restoration. It felt like coming home. Over the next month, Ryan threw himself back into work. The Mustang Mach-1 sold for $48,000. He used the money to finish the warehouse repairs and buy equipment. Word of his story had spread through the classic car community, and suddenly everyone wanted cars restored by the guy who'd taken down Chicago's biggest corruption scandal. Ryan was too busy to appreciate the irony. He hired 2 mechanics, both young guys looking for a chance. He taught them what he knew, showed them how to rebuild transmissions and rewire electrical systems and make a rusted body shine again. The shop slowly transformed from a dream into a reality. Emma came by every weekend to help. She couldn't do much mechanical work, but she learned how to organize tools, keep inventory, and answer the phone. She was good at it, better than Ryan expected. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the story broke, Vanessa stopped by the warehouse. She looked different, less polished. She wore jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked at the cars lined up in the shop and smiled. "You actually did it. Built a real business." "Still building, but yeah." Ryan wiped his hands on a rag. "What about you? How's Sterling Development?" "Surviving? Barely. I rebranded, changed the company name, brought in new management. We're focusing on affordable housing now instead of luxury developments. Trying to do some good with what's left of my father's empire." "That's good." "It's different." She walked over to the 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner Ryan was working on. "This is the same car you were restoring when I first met you?" "Yeah, it's been a journey. Haven't we all?" Vanessa looked at him. "I'm heading out of town for a while, taking some time to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be my father. But I wanted to say goodbye first, and thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me that some things are worth fighting for." She held out her hand. "Good luck, Ryan Maddox. I have a feeling you're going to be just fine." Ryan shook her hand. "You too." She left, and Ryan watched her Mercedes disappear down Riverside Drive. He thought about the woman in the expensive suit who'd walked into his warehouse 8 months ago, demanding he sell her his property, and the woman who'd just left, looking for something real in a life that had been built on lies. People changed, sometimes for the better. The grand jury indictments came down in waves over the next year. 9 people were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. 3 were charged with conspiracy to commit murder in Marcus Chen's death. The trials were long and messy and covered extensively by the media. Ryan testified 3 times. Each time he told the truth as clearly as he could and tried not to think about the cameras or the lawyers or the families of the accused staring at him from the gallery. The first verdicts came back guilty. Then the second. By the end, 7 people were sentenced to prison. 2 fled the country before they could be arrested. The rest took plea deals. It wasn't perfect justice. It never was. But it was something. Marcus Chen's family reached out to Ryan through their lawyer. They wanted to meet him, to thank him for giving them closure after 30 years. Ryan agreed, and they met for coffee at a place downtown. Chen's daughter was in her 50s now, a doctor in Seattle. His son ran an architecture firm in Los Angeles. They both had their father's eyes. "We always knew he didn't kill himself," the daughter said. "Everyone told us we were crazy, that we couldn't accept the truth, but we knew." "He was a good man," the son added. "He tried to do the right thing, and it got him killed." Ryan didn't know what to say, so he just listened as they talked about their father, about the man he'd been before everything fell apart. They thanked Ryan a dozen times before leaving, and Ryan realized that closure mattered more than he'd understood. 2 years after buying the warehouse, Ryan held a grand opening for Maddox Restoration. The place looked nothing like the condemned building he'd first stumbled into. New roof, new walls, proper lighting, climate control. 6 car lifts, a paint booth, an office with glass windows where Emma did her homework after school. The sign above the entrance was hand-painted steel, Emma's design, simple and clean. Just the name and a silhouette of a classic muscle car. Mrs. Chen brought dumplings. Vanessa sent flowers and a card that said, "Congratulations on not dying." A dozen car collectors showed up, along with some mechanics Ryan had met through the restoration community. Even Karen Mills stopped by with a photographer to do a follow-up story. Ryan stood in the middle of his shop, surrounded by people and cars and possibilities, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the arrogant kind. Not the kind that comes from proving people wrong or beating the odds. Just the simple pride of building something with your own hands. Of taking a broken thing and making it whole again. Emma ran up to him, a dumpling in one hand. "Dad, everyone loves it." "Yeah?" "Mrs. Chen says you did good, and she never says that about anything." Ryan laughed. "Well, if Mrs. Chen approves, I must be doing something right." Emma hugged him, and Ryan hugged her back. And for a moment, the world was exactly as it should be. That night, after everyone left and the shop was quiet, Ryan walked through the warehouse one last time before locking up. He ran his hand along the workbench where he'd first spread out Marcus Chen's documents. He looked at the cars waiting for restoration, each one a puzzle to solve, a challenge to meet. He thought about the path that had led him here. Sarah's death, the eviction, the desperate gamble on a condemned building, the hidden evidence, the threats, the fire. All of it had been leading to this moment. And maybe that was the point. Not that everything happened for a reason. Ryan didn't believe in that kind of easy philosophy. Life was random and messy and often cruel. People died who shouldn't. Good people suffered while bad people prospered. The world wasn't fair. But sometimes, if you refused to give up, if you kept pushing even when everything told you to quit, you could carve out a small piece of something good, something real. Ryan had learned that broken things could be fixed if you were willing to put in the work. Cars, buildings, lives. It took time and effort and a lot of bleeding knuckles, but it was possible. He'd learned that doing the right thing was expensive and complicated and often put you in danger, but it was still worth doing, because walking away meant becoming someone you couldn't live with. He'd learned that family wasn't just blood. It was the people who showed up when things got bad. Mrs. Chen watching Emma without being asked. Vanessa helping even when it cost her everything. The mechanics who worked for low wages because they believed in what Ryan was building. And he'd learned that his daughter was tougher than he'd ever given her credit for. She'd handled 2 years of chaos with more grace than Ryan had managed. She'd trusted him when he gave her no reason to. She'd believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. Ryan locked the warehouse and walked to his car. Above him, stars were visible despite the city lights. The river moved past in the darkness, carrying away the past one current at a time. He drove home to the apartment he shared with Emma. It was bigger now, in a better neighborhood, but still small. Still imperfect. Still theirs. Emma was asleep when he got there, her homework spread across the kitchen table, Charlotte's web dog-eared on the counter. Ryan cleaned up quietly, turned off the lights, and checked on her one last time before going to bed himself. Tomorrow he'd start on another car. Another restoration. Another chance to take something broken and make it whole. But tonight, he just slept. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ryan Maddox didn't dream of falling. He dreamed of building. Of Emma growing up strong and capable. Of the warehouse full of cars waiting to be saved. Of all the possibilities that came from refusing to quit. He dreamed of a life worth living, and when he woke up, he got to work making that dream real. 1 year later, Ryan stood in the warehouse and looked at the car that had started everything. The 1972 Ferrari Dino 246 GT. It had been hiding at the back of the collection under the worst tarp in the darkest corner. Ryan had assumed it was just another Mustang or Chevelle, but when he'd finally pulled the cover off 6 months ago, he'd found something extraordinary. The Ferrari was rough. Decades of neglect had taken their toll, but it was complete. Numbers matching, one of only 2,295 ever made. And hidden inside the engine compartment, exactly where Marcus Chen's note had said to look, was the last piece of evidence. A sealed envelope containing photographs of Richard Sterling meeting with organized crime figures, proof of money laundering, proof of connections that went deeper than anyone had suspected. Ryan had given the photographs to Karen Mills. She'd published them. More arrests had followed. But Ryan had kept the car. He'd spent a year restoring it. Every bolt, every seal, every piece of trim. It had been the hardest restoration of his life. Parts were impossible to find. The work was precise and unforgiving. He'd made mistakes and had to start over more times than he could count. But now it was done. The Ferrari sat in the center of the warehouse, gleaming red under the lights. Perfect. Complete. Alive again after 30 years of waiting. Emma walked around it slowly, her eyes wide. "Dad, it's beautiful." "Yeah, monkey, it is." "Are you going to sell it?" Ryan looked at the car, at the thousands of hours of work it represented, at the connection to Marcus Chen and Richard Sterling and everything that had happened. "No," he said, "I think we'll keep this one." Because some things weren't about money. Some things were about remembering, about honoring the people who'd fought for the truth, about keeping a piece of the past alive so the present made sense. The Ferrari would stay in the warehouse, a reminder that broken things could be fixed, that secrets eventually came to light, that justice, however delayed, was still possible, and that a 32-year-old mechanic with bleeding hands and a stubborn heart could change the world, one restored car at a time. Ryan put his arm around Emma's shoulders. Come on, monkey. Let's go home. They walked out of the warehouse together, father and daughter, leaving the past behind and stepping into whatever came next. The building that everyone had called worthless had saved Ryan's life. But more than that, it had reminded him of something he'd forgotten after Sarah died, after the eviction, after months of barely surviving. It reminded him that he was capable of more than just getting by, that he could build something meaningful, that his hands, scarred and calloused and never quite clean, could create beauty from rust and decay. That was worth more than any amount of money Vanessa Sterling could have offered. That was worth everything.